The screen flashes with breaking news banners. The camera pans to a live studio. Denzel Washington sits calmly in a dark suit, hands clasped, eyes cold as steel. Across from him, Donald Trump leans forward, red-faced, still ranting about the election, his voice cracking under pressure. "Let me tell you something, folks," Trump snaps, pounding the desk, "they rigged it. Everyone knows it. I didn't lose, America lost." Denzel just smirks. His silence cuts deeper than any insult. The audience feels it, that electric tension before the storm. Then he leans into the mic and says, slow and steady, "Donald, you didn't lose because of them. You lost because of you." The crowd gasps. Trump freezes, eyes darting, jaw clenching. The host tries to steer things back, but Denzel isn't done. He gestures toward the chaos clips playing on the studio screen: riots, angry crowds, collapsing headlines. "You built this mess," he says, his voice rising now. "You told people to stop believing in truth, now you're drowning in your own lies." The audience erupts. The cameras zoom in on Trump's face, a flicker of fear, then anger. He slams his hand on the desk, shouting, "Fake news. All of it." But Denzel just laughs, that deep, knowing laugh that cuts through noise like a blade. "No, Don," he says, shaking his head, "fake news didn't destroy you. You did." The moderator is speechless. Viewers flood social media within seconds, clips explode across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Denzel just ended Trump on live TV. The phrase trends globally. The studio air turns electric. Cameras zoom closer. Trump's face flushes crimson as his signature smirk fades into something raw, almost panic. He leans forward, gripping the desk like it's the last thing keeping him steady. "You think you're better than me, Denzel," he snaps, voice trembling but defiant. "You're an actor. You don't know what it's like to lead a nation." Denzel interrupts, not loud, but sharp. "You're right, Donald. I'm not a politician. But I do know something about character, and yours has been on trial long before this show." The crowd murmurs. Phones go up. This isn't just another interview, it's a public reckoning. Trump laughs bitterly, looking to the host for support. "This is a setup. You're part of the same Hollywood machine that hates America." But Denzel's gaze doesn't flinch. "Hate America," he says slowly. "Donald, I love this country enough to tell the truth, something you haven't done since you took that oath." The audience roars. The moderator's earpiece buzzes with chaos, producers arguing, networks deciding whether to cut to commercial. But no one dares. This moment is too big. Trump's hands shake slightly as he points across the table. "You think you can talk to me like that? I built this economy." Denzel tilts his head, eyes calm but cutting. "You built an empire of fear. You built division. And now, you're watching it crumble, live on national TV." The words hang heavy in the air. Even the audience falls silent. Trump exhales hard, muttering under his breath, "Fake. All fake." But Denzel's tone turns colder, quieter. "You can't fake integrity, Donald. You can't fake leadership. And when history looks back, it won't remember your towers or tweets, just your fall." The screen behind them flashes, live Twitter trends, hashtag Denzel vs. Trump, hashtag truth wins, hashtag meltdown live. Within minutes, millions are watching the clip again and again, one man losing control, the other reminding America what strength really sounds like. By dawn, every network in America is looping the same clip, Trump pounding the desk, Denzel leaning back with that unbothered, surgical calm. The thumbnail says it all: rage versus restraint. Cable anchors can't stop talking. CNN calls it the moment Trump finally met his match. Fox scrambles for spin. MSNBC runs it in slow motion, replaying Denzel's words like they're scripture. "You can't fake integrity, Donald." Clips flood TikTok. One edit overlays Denzel's line with thunderous music, racking up 80 million views overnight. Comments flood in. "He didn't argue, he annihilated." That laugh was louder than any speech. Denzel just became the people's prosecutor. Meanwhile, Trump is fuming. In a late-night Truth Social rant, he types in all caps, "Denzel Washington is a liar and a leftist tool." Sad. But the post backfires instantly. Screenshots spread faster than wildfire, paired with memes of Denzel's iconic smirk. One caption reads, "When the truth burns so hard even autocorrect flinches." By morning, reporters camp outside both men's homes. Cameras flash. Denzel steps out, calm as ever, black coffee in hand. "Mr. Washington, any comment on last night?" a reporter yells. Denzel pauses, then says softly, "No comment needed. The truth already spoke." That single sentence detonates online. It's replayed on every platform, dissected on podcasts, turned into a t-shirt slogan. Meanwhile, inside Trump Tower, chaos reigns. Advisors argue, PR teams panic. "He made you look weak," one aide whispers. Trump slams his hand down. "Then we'll make him the enemy." Within hours, talking heads flood conservative media, calling Denzel Hollywood propaganda, race-baiting elitist, un-American. But the narrative has already flipped. For millions, the clip wasn't about politics. It was about truth finally punching back. By morning, the White House war room felt more like a bunker. Phones buzzed, aides shouted, and on every monitor, Denzel's calm stare played on loop. "You built this mess," the clip echoed. Every replay tightened the knot in Trump's jaw. He slammed his hand on the table. "I want every network that ran that clip punished. Sue someone. Call Elon. I want that video buried." His team exchanged nervous glances, even they knew it was too late. The internet had already claimed it. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed silent. No tweets. No statements. Just silence, and that silence hurt more than any insult. It became the story. Every outlet asked the same question, why won't he respond? But he didn't need to. The more Trump shouted, the smaller he looked. Then came the retaliation. At a hastily arranged press conference, Trump stormed onto the podium. Cameras flashed. "Denzel Washington should stick to movies," he barked. "He's a phony patriot, a fake tough guy, another Hollywood coward who hates real Americans." But within hours, that rant backfired. The clip of Trump yelling contrasted with Denzel's calm demeanor in side-by-side edits flooded TikTok and YouTube shorts. One viral caption read, "One man's losing his cool. The other already won." Denzel finally broke his silence, but not with a speech. On his Instagram, he posted a black screen with 5 words. "Truth doesn't need to shout." No hashtags. No explanation. Just that. It hit harder than any statement. News anchors quoted it like gospel. Late-night hosts called it the coolest mic drop in history. And while Trump's team tried to control the blaze, Denzel's quiet defiance became a movement. Hashtags like hashtag truth doesn't shout and hashtag Denzel said it all exploded across social media. The war had gone digital, and Denzel wasn't even fighting. He was winning by refusing to play. The sun rose over Washington like a wound that wouldn't heal. Every screen, from Manhattan billboards to airport lounges, played the same 20 seconds, Denzel's face lit by studio light, his voice a calm storm. "You built this mess," he said again, but now the words had grown teeth. They weren't just aimed at Trump. They'd become a mirror for a nation tired of excuses. News anchors called it the moment America stopped laughing. Talk shows analyzed his tone like it was evidence in a trial. Hashtags spread like wildfire, hashtag truth doesn't shout, hashtag Denzel versus Donald, hashtag the mess builder. Within 24 hours, millions of Americans were quoting him, teachers, soldiers, even Wall Street brokers. A clip of a construction worker in Detroit saying, "He's right, "We built the mess, but he told us to," went viral. Meanwhile, chaos brewed in the Oval Office. Trump's aides whispered behind closed doors, their fear smelling like sweat and coffee. Polls began to collapse, approval ratings plunging faster than anyone had seen since Nixon. Fox hosts hesitated mid-segment, unsure whether to defend or distance. And still, Denzel said nothing. He was filming in Atlanta, caught walking from his trailer to set, wearing a gray hoodie and holding a Bible. When a reporter shouted, "Mr. Washington, any comment on the president's remarks?" he turned slightly, smiled faintly, and said, "He's already said enough for both of us." That line detonated across the internet. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. It was grace with a backbone. By evening, the backlash had mutated into something larger. Protesters gathered outside the Capitol, holding signs that read, "Truth doesn't need to shout," and "Hollywood told the truth." Cable news anchors whispered about a cultural fracture. Political strategists called it the Denzel effect. Inside Mar-a-Lago, Trump watched the footage on mute, eyes twitching with each replay. "He thinks he can humiliate me," he muttered. "I'll show him humiliation." But deep down, even he knew, this wasn't just bad PR. This was the shift, the moment the story stopped being about him, and started being about America finally listening. It started quietly, a late-night post, barely coherent, sent from Trump's gilded office at Mar-a-Lago. Then another. And another. Each one angrier, more erratic. "Denzel Washington is a fraud," one read. "Hollywood hates America." Another, all caps again, "I made this country rich, he made movies." By morning, he'd posted 16 times. Every network picked it up. MSNBC called it the midnight unraveling. CNN simply labeled it the meltdown. Meanwhile, Denzel was in New York for an awards gala, a picture of composure. Cameras flashed as he stepped from a black sedan, no entourage, no statement, no spectacle. When a reporter shouted, "Mr. Washington, the president says you've betrayed America," he paused mid-step, smiled, and said, "Then I guess honesty's unpatriotic now." The quote ricocheted across every social feed within an hour. One TikTok looped it over footage of Trump's online rants, "Denzel calm, Trump furious," captioned, "Grace under pressure versus ego under fire." Trump's own party began to fracture. Senators distanced themselves, aides resigned quietly. Behind closed doors, advisors begged him to stop tweeting. "Sir, every time you respond, you're making him bigger." Trump slammed the desk. "I'm the president. He's an actor." But it didn't matter. The contrast had already burned into the public mind, composure versus chaos, integrity versus impulse. Then came the final straw, a leaked recording from inside the West Wing. An aide captured Trump yelling, "We should ban his movies. Freeze his accounts. I want him erased." The recording aired on primetime. Overnight, #EraseDenzel trended, but not how Trump wanted. People rallied. Denzel's calm had become a form of resistance. Memes spread like wildfire, Denzel's laugh dubbed over Trump's outbursts, a symbol of quiet rebellion. That weekend, for the first time in his career, Trump's approval rating fell below 20%. Even conservative pundits called it the week the empire cracked. And through it all, Denzel never raised his voice. Never argued. He simply reminded America that the louder a man screams, the more truth he fears. The night was electric before the cameras even rolled. The network had teased it for a week straight, face to face, Washington versus Trump, live. No one believed it would actually happen. But here they were. The studio pulsed with nervous energy. Rows of bright white lights hung over a round black table that looked more like a war room than a talk show set. An audience of journalists, veterans, and political analysts filled the seats, whispering, waiting. You could feel history vibrating in the air. Then, the doors opened. Denzel Washington walked in first, dark tailored suit, eyes sharp, posture unshaken. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He simply sat, folded his hands, and looked straight into the camera lens like it was the soul of the country itself. Seconds later, Trump entered to a storm of camera flashes. He forced a grin, pointed at the crowd, then leaned toward Denzel. "Back again for your sequel," he sneered. Denzel didn't move. "No sequel, Donald," he said evenly. "Just unfinished business." The host barely got out a welcome before the two men locked eyes, the kind of silence that makes producers sweat and viewers lean closer to their screens. Trump started first, his tone half bravado, half desperation. "You think people care about what you say? You're just an actor playing hero. I lived it. I built this country." Denzel leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice dropped to a near whisper, slow, deliberate, surgical. "You built chaos. You built fear. And when it all came crashing down, you blamed everyone but the man in the mirror." The audience gasped, then hushed. The host tried to speak, but Trump cut in, shouting, "That's a lie. You don't know what it's like to be betrayed by your own people." Denzel's expression didn't change. "I do," he said softly. "It's what happens every time a leader forgets that the people aren't props." The crowd erupted, half applause, half disbelief. Trump's face reddened, his jaw flexed like stone. "You're nothing but a phony moralist," he barked. And Denzel, calm, unbothered, smiled faintly. Better a moralist than a man who sold his soul for applause. The moderator froze. The room went silent again. The moment felt biblical, one man roaring to be heard, the other whispering truth until the noise bowed to it. Twitter exploded before the debate even ended. Hashtag Denzel destroyed Trump, hashtag SoulOvershow, hashtag Truth Table. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was Judgment Day, and the cameras caught every second. The next morning, America woke up divided, but electrified. The showdown had become the most watched broadcast in U.S. history, breaking every streaming record within hours. Clips from the debate flooded every corner of the internet, Denzel's measured tone against Trump's fury, the calm before the chaos. In coffee shops and classrooms, people weren't talking about policies anymore, they were talking about truth. Hashtags like hashtag SoulOvershow, hashtag Truth Table, and hashtag Denzel Moment trended for 3 straight days. Late-night hosts called it the night decency fought back. Even foreign leaders commented, one European diplomat tweeting, "If America has a conscience, it just spoke with Denzel's voice." Meanwhile, Trump's world was crumbling from the inside. Donors withdrew. Longtime allies ghosted him. His legal team warned that his latest meltdown had opened him to new investigations. But Trump couldn't let it go. Every hour, he called networks demanding airtime, shouting into phones, "They made me look weak." Inside a Manhattan hotel room, Denzel watched silently. No celebration, no satisfaction, just that quiet look of someone who understood the cost of truth. His assistant entered, phone in hand. "You've become the most quoted man in America," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "That's not the point," he murmured. "The point is whether America's finally listening." Back in Washington, crowds gathered again, this time not for protest, but reflection. Someone projected Denzel's words onto a federal building. "You built chaos. You built fear." By midnight, it had become a national mural, the skyline glowing with the sentence that defined a generation. Trump, pacing alone in his suite, stared at the TV. His reflection flickered against Denzel's frozen image on screen. "He thinks he's better than me," he whispered. "He thinks he can take my country." But outside that room, the country had already moved on. The empire of noise had finally met the power of silence. 3 nights after the storm, Denzel appeared on live television again, not in a studio this time, but standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The marble gleamed under floodlights. Behind him, the reflecting pool shimmered like liquid glass, mirroring a restless America trying to recognize itself again. He didn't arrive with fanfare or an entourage. There was no teleprompter, no grand introduction. Just Denzel in a black coat, looking straight into the camera, the nation's pulse beating in silence on the other side of the screen. "When I was a kid," he began, voice low but sure, "my mother told me that when a man breaks something, he should fix it. America's been breaking itself for a long time." Every TV and phone screen in the country froze on his face. You could hear breaths being held. "I didn't go on that show to start a fight," he continued. "I went because truth got quiet, and when truth gets quiet, lies get loud. We've been shouting for years. Shouting on the streets, on the screens, into each other's faces. Maybe it's time we start listening again." He paused. The camera tightened, catching the faint tremor of emotion under his composure. "This isn't about me and it isn't about one man in the White House. It's about us. It's about who we choose to be when no one's watching, when the cameras are off, when the applause dies. Because leadership isn't what you say when you're in charge. It's what you do when no one believes in you anymore." For a long second, he just stood there, the monument behind him glowing like history itself was paying attention. Then he looked straight into the lens, his voice soft but cutting. "We can't rebuild this country with rage. We rebuild it with responsibility." He nodded once. "Let's start tonight." The broadcast ended without music, without applause, just the image of a man standing under the shadow of Lincoln, echoing something America had almost forgotten: humility. Within hours, people began calling it the speech that stopped the noise. The next morning, America felt different. Not healed, not whole, but quieter. Streets that had been filled with arguments now buzzed with conversation. The shouting on talk shows softened. Even social media, the digital battleground of endless noise, slowed down for a moment to breathe. Clips of Denzel's speech played on loop across every platform. The image of him standing beneath Lincoln's statue had become iconic, frozen in that perfect blend of defiance and grace. Journalists called it a sermon to a divided soul. Schools replayed it in civics classes. Churches quoted it in Sunday sermons. Even a few of Trump's former supporters admitted, reluctantly, he said what needed to be said. In one powerful moment, something changed, the tone of the nation. Trump, meanwhile, had vanished from public view. His last rally drew only a fraction of the crowd it once did. He tried to fire back with a statement calling Denzel Hollywood's preacher boy, but it fell flat. People weren't angry anymore, they were tired. And that fatigue was the final nail in the coffin of his noise. Weeks later, at a film premiere, a reporter asked Denzel if he felt like he'd won. He smiled that familiar, knowing smile. "This wasn't a fight," he said. "It was a wake-up call." The interviewer pressed, "And Trump?" Denzel looked toward the flashing cameras, his tone steady and timeless. "History always answers louder than men do." That night, murals appeared across major cities, Denzel's face beside the quote, "Truth doesn't need to shout." In Times Square, thousands gathered, candles flickering under the words projected across glass towers. "We can't rebuild this country with rage. We rebuild it with responsibility." And for the first time in a long time, America didn't argue. It listened. The story wasn't about politics anymore. It was about power, and what happens when power meets conscience. Years later, historians would call it the night of the reckoning. But to those who lived it, it was simpler than that. It was the night Denzel reminded a country that leadership doesn't come from fear, or fury, or fame. It comes from the courage to speak softly when the whole world is screaming. Power doesn't corrupt a man. It reveals him. And sometimes, all it takes to expose the truth. Is one calm voice in a room full of noise. America doesn't need another show, it needs reflection.